Hey guys, welcome back to another episode which is not our creepy trip across Japan. It felt so refreshing to upload a video last week where I didn't have to do any editing other than the audio, so after another busy week, I'm bringing you yet another similar episode. The backgrounds I use in these types of videos were all taken by me in various places in Japan. It's just there to watch and zone out over, so don't read too deep into it. So, this is an episode I've been wanting to do for a while and it's finally become reality. Have you ever heard of the term Yandere? Whether you have or not, don't worry because this video is all about it. I'll explain what the term means and then share 3 stories of people who have experienced this crazy, psychotic type of love. If you can even call it love. Won't blab too much today. Let's get started. When people think of romance in anime or Japanese media, images of blushing schoolgirls, shy confessions, or cherry blossom-filled love stories come to mind. But lurking beneath that soft, sweet surface lies something much darker and far more intense. A character type that whispers sweetly before whispering threats, that gives everything for love and then takes everything away. This is the world of the Yandere. Let's start with the basics. The term Yandere is made up of 2 Japanese words, yanderu, which means to be mentally or emotionally ill, and dere, a term that refers to someone who is affectionate or lovey-dovey. So put simply, a yandere is a character who starts off sweet and loving but becomes dangerously obsessive. Sometimes even violent due to their intense emotional attachment to someone they love. This isn't just someone with a crush. This is someone who will follow, control, hurt, or even kill just to protect what they think is their love. While the word itself is modern, the idea has deep roots in Japanese storytelling. Even in old folk tales and traditional kabuki theater, you can find women driven to madness by betrayal or unrequited love. These tragic figures might haunt their former lovers or become demons fueled by jealousy. Fast forward to the modern era. Anime, manga, and visual novels took that same emotional theme and wrapped it in a new archetype. The term yandere started spreading in the early 2000s, especially in online forums and fan communities. Fans began noticing certain patterns in characters. They were gentle at first, but if someone else got too close to their crush, they snapped. And once the internet took hold of it, the yandere became a full-fledged phenomenon. So what makes someone yandere? There are a few key signs. At first, they're the perfect partner. Devoted, affectionate, maybe even a little shy. They might cook for their love interest, write them letters, or blush whenever they're near. But behind the scenes, something darker is brewing. They might start to follow the person around, watch their conversations, or isolate them from others. As jealousy builds, they become more and more possessive, until eventually, they'll do anything to keep that person close, even if it means hurting themselves, even if it means ending a life. It's not about lust or domination. It's about a warped, overwhelming need to protect a bond they feel slipping away. The yandere doesn't just want to be loved, they want to be the only one loved. Now here's something important to understand. The yandere archetype isn't just about shock value or horror. It also reflects deeper aspects of Japanese culture. In Japanese society, emotional restraint is often encouraged. People are taught to be calm, polite, and not to make a scene. Public displays of affection are rare, and intense emotions are usually kept private. That's why the idea of someone losing control, especially out of love, is so powerful. A yandere represents the dark emotional extremes that many people never show. It's the fantasy of unconditional love taken to a terrifying extreme, and in a way, it lets viewers explore taboo emotions, jealousy, obsession, rage, without having to act on them. Yandere characters also tap into the moe culture in Japan, where fans are drawn to vulnerable or emotionally intense characters. Sometimes a yandere isn't just scary, they're pitiful, even tragic. They want love, but they've lost their way. Yandere isn't the only romantic archetype in Japanese media. There's tsundere, where someone acts cold or hostile but secretly cares deeply. There's kudere, calm and unemotional on the surface but loving underneath. And then there's yandere. Loving, yes, but so obsessively loving that it turns into madness. These archetypes are often used to explore different aspects of love and relationships, exaggerated for storytelling. Where tsundere love is hot and cold, yandere love is boiling over. The archetype has exploded in anime, games, and fan culture, but beyond the screen, it's become a favorite in cosplay, fan fiction, and even YouTube roleplays. You'll find people online performing yandere voice acting clips, whispering lines like, "If I can't have you, no one can." There are even full games built around the yandere fantasy. Fans aren't just watching from a distance, they're immersing themselves in it. Why? Because, for some, the idea of being loved that deeply, even dangerously, is strangely thrilling. The fantasy is powerful. Being the center of someone's universe, being needed that much, it has a strange seductive pull. Of course, most people recognize it's just fiction, but it still sparks a wide range of reactions, from fascination to discomfort to concern. Now, let's be clear. Yandere characters are fictional, but they often show behaviors that mirror real psychological conditions. There's something called obsessive love disorder, not an official diagnosis, but it describes a pattern of intense, controlling love. People with this condition might stalk, manipulate, or become violent when they feel rejected. There's also delusional jealousy, sometimes called Othello syndrome, where someone believes, without proof, that their partner is being unfaithful. And some traits overlap with conditions like borderline personality disorder, which includes fear of abandonment, emotional volatility, and unstable relationships. But here's the key. Yandere stories aren't medical case studies. They're symbolic. They're dramatized expressions of a single idea: love taken too far. So while there may be real-life behaviors that resemble what we see in these characters, it's important not to confuse the two. You may be thinking about stalkers right now. Stalking and yandere behavior may seem similar at first glance. Both involve obsession, possessiveness, and an intense fixation on a single person, but their roots and realities are very different. In the real world, stalking is a criminal act driven by control, manipulation, or delusion, often without any real relationship between the stalker and their target. It's invasive, terrifying, and deeply traumatic. In contrast, the yandere archetype is a fictional character who is obsessively in love, so much so that they're willing to hurt others or even their beloved just to preserve that bond. While both stalkers and yandere characters cross boundaries and violate consent, the yandere is often portrayed with a tragic or romantic flair, even when they descend into violence. As with any archetype, yandere characters don't exist without controversy. Some critics say they romanticize unhealthy relationships. Others point out that most yandere characters are women, which can reinforce harmful stereotypes, like the idea that women are emotionally unstable or dangerous when rejected. There's also concern that it stigmatizes mental illness, associating disorders with violence or obsessive behavior. But many fans argue that it's no different from horror or thriller genres. It's about exploring the extreme of human emotion, not endorsing them. And like all fiction, the way it's interpreted depends heavily on the viewer. Unfortunately, Japan has seen real incidents that echo yandere behavior. Cases where someone committed violence in the name of love or obsession. In some high-profile cases, the media even used the word yandere to describe the attacker. One woman stabbed her partner multiple times, saying, "I loved him so much, I couldn't let anyone else have him." These incidents are rare, but they're reminders that obsession isn't just a fictional trope. It's a real danger when emotional control is lost. That's why it's so important to distinguish between fiction and reality. A yandere story might be entertaining or compelling, but real-life relationships should always be built on trust, respect, and mutual care. So why does the yandere trope continue to capture people's imaginations? Maybe it's the drama. Maybe it's the psychological depth. Or maybe it's because deep down we're all fascinated by what love can do, how it can uplift or destroy. The yandere character is the embodiment of love's dark side. They're not just villains. They're reflections of what happens when affection turns into obsession and when connection becomes possession. Now, let's move in to 3 stories of people experiencing this yandere type of love. I moved into apartment 302 at the start of spring semester. It wasn't anything fancy, a small one-room place with a narrow kitchen and a balcony just wide enough to stand on. But it was cheap, and more importantly, it was quiet. I was 2 hours away from my parents' house in Chiba and ready to start fresh in Tokyo where nobody knew me. That anonymity was exactly what I needed. The building was an older, 3-story concrete box with outdoor stairs and railings that creaked when you leaned on them. Most of my neighbors kept to themselves, and that suited me just fine. There was a girl next door in 301, but I didn't see her often. I only caught glimpses when we left for school around the same time. She always wore a mask, and her bangs covered her eyes. At first, I assumed she was shy or just didn't like people. No judgment from me there. I'm not exactly the social type either. One day, I held the elevator door for her. She nodded but said nothing. Her eyes flicked toward me for a second before darting away. I told myself she was just introverted, but the elevator ride felt far too long for 3 floors. I think it was the 3rd week when I noticed something odd. My umbrella was missing. I knew I left it by the door, but when I came back from class, it was gone. I figured someone maybe took it by accident in the shared hallway. The next week, I noticed the fridge door was slightly ajar, just enough that the light was on. I was sure I hadn't left it like that. I began to wonder if maybe the door seal was loose or I was just being careless. But then, more small things began to happen. The bathroom light was on when I came home, even though I always turned it off before leaving. My toothbrush felt damp. There was a faint perfume smell on my pillow. One time, I found a long strand of hair on my bedsheet. It wasn't mine. It was finer, lighter, definitely not my texture, and obviously longer. I held it up to the sunlight and felt sick. It was subtle, nothing dramatic, but it added up like someone brushing against you in a crowd, almost invisible, but still felt. I started checking the door twice before I left, then 3 times. I even taped a hair on the edge of the doorframe to see if anyone came in while I was gone. After 3 uneventful days, the hair disappeared. I changed my lock. That night, I heard crying through the wall. It was soft and muffled, like someone trying not to be heard. I pressed my ear to the wall, It was definitely from Unit 301, the girl next door. I almost knocked just to see if she was okay, but I didn't. I don't know why. After that, the crying stopped, but something else started. Notes began appearing on my balcony. Folded pieces of paper held down by pebbles, always in the morning, always after a rainy night. At first, they were simple. "Are you lonely too? I see you studying. You look tired. You looked nice in that sweater." My building didn't have side access to the balconies, which meant whoever left the notes had to climb over from an adjacent one, probably from 301. I never wrote back, but the notes kept coming. More personal, more detailed. "I made you curry. You didn't eat it. I left it in the fridge. Were you scared? I saw you with her. Do you like her more than me? Don't lie to me. I know you read these." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor, back to the wall, a kitchen knife in my lap. I stared at the balcony door until the sun came up. The next morning, I went to the landlord. I told him someone might be entering my apartment. He shrugged, said the building was old and break-ins weren't common. He offered to send someone to check the locks next week. I started keeping my laptop webcam recording when I wasn't home, and 2 days later, I checked the footage. I saw her. She came in through the balcony door, calm like she belonged there. She went straight to my closet, touched my clothes, laid down on my bed, stared at the ceiling, and then left. I should have gone to the police, but I didn't. I copied the footage to a USB and kept it in my pocket. I didn't even confront her. I just wanted to pretend it wasn't happening. That's until one night when I came home and everything smelled like her perfume. I opened the door and saw my apartment exactly as I left it, except for a single photo on my desk. It was a picture of me sleeping, and it was taken from above. I ran. I stayed with a friend across town for a week, and when I came back, the photo was gone. Everything was clean. Way too clean. My sheets were different, my fridge was fully stocked, and there was a note on my desk. "Don't leave me again. I missed you." That night, I bolted the balcony door shut with screws. I installed a motion detector inside, and I left my lights on all night. It came at 3:23 a.m. A gentle knock on the balcony glass, followed by another and another. Not banging, just tapping. It was light, polite, and repetitive. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just listened, and it continued for over an hour. Eventually, it stopped, and in the morning, I found a note taped to the glass. "Why are you scared of me? I love you more than anyone ever will." That day, I looked up private security companies. I considered getting a hotel. I even thought about calling the police, but I hesitated. What would I say? My neighbor keeps sneaking in and leaving notes? It sounded insane. Instead, I tried to act normal. I went to class, I studied at the library, came home late, left early in the morning, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder. One night, as I walked down the hallway toward my door, I saw a shadow retreat behind the far corner. I stopped and listened, but there was nothing. When I got inside, there was a small bento box waiting on my kitchen counter. It was wrapped with a pink ribbon and it was still warm. I threw it in the trash and scrubbed my hands until they were raw. That was the last straw, and I moved out 2 days later. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't even tell the landlord. I just packed what I could carry and left the rest behind. It's been 3 months now, but I still get letters. No return address, it's just my name, and inside, there's always a single sentence. I know where you are. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and check all my locks again. Sometimes I think I hear tapping on the window, even though I live on the 8th floor now. And sometimes I wonder if she's already here, watching, waiting. They say love should be gentle, that it should grow naturally like sunlight on the edge of a quiet morning. But I didn't know that, not back then. I learned love through fragments, a glance, a scent, an eraser left behind on a shared desk. I thought that was enough. I thought if I just held on tight enough, it would become real. Now, when I look back, I can't believe how far I went. But at the time, it felt right. It started in April, my second year of high school. He sat in the second row from the window, third seat back. His posture was careless, like he wanted to disappear. That only made him more noticeable. His name was Yuto. He said it like it didn't matter. Just a name, just a boy. But to me, he was everything. I memorized him before he ever knew I existed. The way he twirled his pen, the way he bit the inside of his cheeks during tests, how he packed his bag with perfect order. I remember thinking, he's so meticulous, so alone. He must be waiting for someone like me. It didn't matter that we'd never spoken. I believed our connection was deeper than words. I started coming to school early, wiping down his desk. I left small things behind, a mint, a sharpened pencil, once a folded paper crane. He never kept them, but I watched his eyes pause on them, and that was enough. Looking back, I understand how strange that sounds, but at the time it felt sweet, innocent, like I was helping him in some way, like I was already part of his life. Then came the day he left his notebook behind. I still remember how my fingers trembled when I opened it. His handwriting was sharp, a little too neat for a boy. The math notes were methodical, but the literature pages were chaotic, scratched out words, frayed thoughts. One name stood out, scribbled out so violently that the paper was torn. It was a girl's name. I don't even remember what it was now, but back then it was all I could see. I convinced myself she hurt him, that he needed someone better. Me. I didn't realize then that I was just building a story, one where I was the savior and everyone else was the villain. By May, I knew his schedule better than my own. He spent lunch breaks on the rooftop alone. I'd watch from the stairwell. He never knew. At least, I don't think he did. One day, he looked right toward me, just once. I told myself it meant something, that he felt me somehow, like a magnet. When I heard him laugh with Erika, a girl in our class, I felt something inside me snap. She was loud, bubbly, the kind of girl people noticed. She didn't deserve his attention, so I wrote him a letter. I didn't put my name, of course, and I asked a question. Do you ever feel like someone understands you even without speaking? He read it. I know he did, but he never responded. I followed the two once. Her hand touched his arm, and he allowed it. I was furious, so I walked by her house. I left a dead cicada on her windowsill. At the time, it didn't feel violent. It felt symbolic, like a warning, a mark. By July, I found out where he worked part-time. It was a convenience store. I tried to apply, but they didn't hire me. But I still went there every single day. Bought something cheap just to see him. He never looked at me, and that hurt more than anything. Still, I stood outside once by the vending machine when he finished his shift. He walked past and our shoulders nearly touched. I could smell his shampoo. It smelled citrusy and clean, and I memorized it. I started writing letters I never sent. diary entries addressed to him. "You look tired today. She doesn't love you like I do. I know your truth, even if you hide it." I read them aloud in the dark, whispered them like prayers. Sometimes I wonder if those prayers reached him. When summer came, I saw them at the festival. Erika in a yukata, laughing too loudly once again. I spilled soda on her and pretended it was an accident. I remember the look she gave me, confused and then wary. She didn't come to school the next day, and I told myself I was protecting him. In September, she reported a break-in. Nothing stolen, just drawers opened, clothes were moved around, and the rumors were vicious. I knew what I did was wrong, but I told myself she deserved it, that she was trying to take him away. Yuto looked exhausted. I thought that meant he missed me. By October, I was dreaming of him nightly. Conversations that never happened, secrets he never told. I started to think I really knew him, deeper than his own friends, deeper than his family. I wasn't well. I know that now. But back then, I believed I was the only one who truly saw him. In November, I switched our test papers, just once. He got a perfect score. I failed and I was scolded, but he smiled that day, albeit briefly. I felt like I gave him something. I was obviously spiraling, but I didn't see it. And by December, there were moments when I almost did something worse. I thought about hurting people, hurting myself to get his attention. I stood at the edge of a train platform once and thought, if I fell, would he cry? I didn't, of course, but the thought stayed with me. In January, Erika transferred schools. I found one of her earrings and I held it until it left an imprint, and then I dropped it down a drain. I felt nothing. I didn't just love Yuto, I worshipped him. My world shrank down until he was the only point on my map. Every choice I made revolved around him. Every plan, every breath. I had no identity without him. By February, I had built an entire life in my mind. I imagined what our conversations would be like. I imagined him reading my letters and crying. I imagined him turning to me in the hallway and saying, I always knew it was you. When I closed my eyes, I could feel his hand in mine, and I could hear his voice in the silence. And yet, we had never spoken, not once. One evening, I walked past his apartment building. I had memorized his window and the light was on. A shadow moved inside. I stood across the street for almost an hour, and when the light went out, I whispered, Good night. The next morning, I started writing again. Not just letters, poetry, stories, all about him, how we met in another life and how we overcame fate. I submitted one to the school's literary magazine under a fake name, and it was published. I read it every night. By March, graduation loomed. He would be gone soon, out of reach, and that thought made my chest tighten. I considered approaching him just to be able to speak to him one time, but I couldn't. I didn't want to shatter the illusion. In my head, he was perfect. Our bond was sacred and real life couldn't compete. Instead, I wrote him a final letter. It was 10 pages of everything I felt, every detail I knew about him, and every moment I watched him. I sealed it, addressed it, and then I burnt it. Now, when I think of those months, I feel like I'm watching someone else's life. A ghost version of me, obsessed, delusional, alone. Yuto never knew me, not really, and he probably never will. I don't go near schools anymore. I stopped writing those letters and stopped lurking. I threw away my diaries, burnt the old ones, and I go to therapy. I take my meds and I tell myself every day that I was wrong. But the strangest part? Even now, a small part of me still remembers how deeply I believed I loved him. Not in a selfish way, not at first. I thought I was giving him something pure, and maybe that's what makes it so terrifying. Not the actions, but the belief that I was saving him. I wasn't. I was only ever saving myself from loneliness, from irrelevance, from becoming invisible. I'm not that girl anymore, but sometimes in my dreams I see her watching from the stairwell, and I wonder if she ever really left. When I met Arisa, it was nothing like the love stories people romanticize. There was no spark, no fated moment that tied us together with invisible thread. We were just two uni students thrown into the same seminar group in Kanagawa, trying to survive boring lectures and clumsy presentations. We started talking over group messages, then meeting up for late-night study sessions. By the time the autumn leaves had carpeted the campus paths in shades of fire and rust, we were a couple. Arisa was soft-spoken, almost hesitant. She had a way of tilting her head when she asked questions, as if bracing for a wrong answer. She cried during movies, laughed too loud when she was embarrassed, and baked me sweets she insisted weren't good enough, even though they were delicious. She was thoughtful to a fault, always making sure I was okay, always asking if I needed anything. At first, it felt comforting, like finally someone saw me. But I've come to learn that being seen isn't always the same as being understood. In those early weeks, she made me feel wanted. Not just liked, but needed in a way that made it hard to pull away. She sent me texts first thing in the morning and last thing at night. At first it was sweet, photo messages of her breakfast or a blurry picture of her face with the caption, "Miss you." But then the messages grew in number. If I took too long to reply, she'd send another, and another, until I'd find a flood of them waiting for me between lectures.
"Where are you? Did you forget about me? Are you with someone else?"
I brushed it off in the beginning. Everyone has insecurities, right? Maybe she'd been through something before. Maybe she just needed a little reassurance. So I played along, smiled, texted back quicker. I didn't realize that by doing that, I was already giving up little pieces of myself. Over time, she seemed to know my schedule better than I did. I'd walk out of class and find her waiting. Not occasionally. Every day. She'd act surprised, say she was just passing by. But even when lectures ended early, there she was, like she'd been watching the clock more closely than I had. I tried to convince myself it was romantic, that maybe this was what real devotion looked like. After all, isn't that what people want? Someone who makes them the center of their universe? But devotion, I've come to learn, can suffocate too. By the end of winter, I couldn't mention another girl's name without seeing Arisa's face cloud over. If I talked about a classmate, she'd fall silent. If I mentioned my old friend Haruka, her lips would press together tightly and she'd suddenly remember she had to go home early. Once, when I said I was grabbing coffee with a few friends, she didn't message me for 2 full days. And when she finally did, it was a photo of her stuffed fox plushie sitting alone on her bed.
"He's lonely without you. Do you really need anyone else when you have us?"
I wanted to believe she was joking, but the message stayed with me. Then came the visits. At first, she'd show up with lunch or just to say hi, but soon she started coming uninvited. I'd come home and find her sitting on my couch, having somehow convinced my landlord or a neighbor to let her in. When I told her I needed a bit more time to myself, she didn't fight me. She just nodded, quietly packed up her things, and left. I thought she'd understood, but the silence that followed was worse. 3 days passed without a word. When she finally reached out, it was a photo of her arm, and it was bruised.
I fell down the stairs. I guess I shouldn't walk alone when I'm feeling sad. Maybe if I had someone who cared more, they'd be there to catch me.
I called her immediately, but she didn't answer. I texted her non-stop. Finally, she picked up and her voice was barely above a whisper. She said it was fine and that it was nothing. I went to her place the next morning with hot soup and stayed the whole afternoon, holding her while she clung to me like I was the only thing keeping her grounded. After that, she changed. Or maybe I just started noticing. She started drinking her coffee black, even though she hated it. She changed her shampoo to the same one I used. She started repeating my phrases, my jokes, my expressions. Her social media began to mirror mine. Same restaurants, same books, same obscure indie band I once casually mentioned liking. It was subtle mimicry at first, and it was flattering, but then it grew unsettling. One evening, while she was showering at my place, I saw a notebook on my desk. I knew I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside were drawings, pages and pages of me, sitting, laughing, walking. Some were dated before we officially met. One sketch showed me leaning over to hug Haruka, a moment that I never even noticed someone capturing. That page was scratched through with red ink, lines cutting across our faces. When she came out and saw me holding it, she didn't flinch.
You weren't supposed to see that yet,
she said, calm as ever. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, days later, to talk to her. I told her it was too much, that I felt like I was drowning and I needed space to breathe. She didn't argue back or raise her voice. She just looked at me with her eyes wide and said,
"But you said you loved me."
And I had. That was the worst part. I loved the girl I thought she was. Since then, I've tried setting boundaries. I told her not to come uninvited, to text only during the day, to let me have a life outside of us. She nodded, agreed to everything, and even thanked me for being honest. And yet, a week later, she appeared outside my part-time job. She said she'd been in the area. When I asked her how she knew my shift, she just smiled and said,
"I remember everything you say."
So since then, I've stopped sharing details about my day. I changed my social media settings and started taking different routes home. But none of it mattered. She always finds a way. One night, I woke to soft knocking. Not on my door, but on the window beside my bed. I'm on the second floor. She was standing on the fire escape. When I opened the window in shock, she stepped in, barefoot, shivering, and wrapped her arms around me.
"I had a bad dream,"
she whispered. That night, I didn't sleep. I just watched her as she lay beside me, her breathing slow and even, like she belonged there, like she always would. I want to leave. I think about it every day, but I don't know how. She hasn't hurt me. Not really. She hasn't screamed or lashed out. There's no bruises on my skin, only this constant pressure in my chest, like I'm living in a box that's slowly shrinking. But she's kind and caring, and she still makes me lunch. She still kisses my forehead, and whenever I pull away even a little, she collapses. Not dramatically, but just enough to make me feel like a monster. And I can't be the bad guy. Not when she looks at me like I'm her whole world. Not when she whispers,
"You saved me."
Not when part of me, deep down, wonders if I somehow created this. If my kindness, my hesitation, my cowardice watered something inside her that should have never grown. Anyway, I'm still here, still stuck in this relationship. I still wake up each day wondering if today will be the one I finally find the words. Or if today will be the day she decides I don't need to speak ever again. That's it for today, guys. Yandere. Scary, hey? If you didn't know what the term meant before, well, now you know. If any of you have experienced warped love like this before, share your stories with us in the comments. Be wary of the people you give your heart to, although sometimes you find out a little too late. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you again in the next video. Cheers.